The number one killer worldwide in economically developed countries is cardiovascular disease. When I was younger, two of my uncles passed away from it in the form of a stroke. At that time, they actually exhibited some early symptoms that they were about to have a stroke. Sadly, my family and I weren't aware how to interpret those early signs. So in this video, I'm gonna give you the top 10 warning signs of a stroke a week before it happens. This could potentially be life-saving information because the CDC emphasizes the importance of early action. People who arrive at the hospital within 3 hours of their first symptoms often experience less disability 3 months after a stroke than those who receive delayed care. So time is of the essence. That's why it's crucial to know the early warning signs of stroke. And make sure to stick around until the end because I'm also going to give you some extremely effective preventative measures in order to avoid this debilitating disease. For context, a stroke happens when the blood supply to the brain is interrupted. In about 80% of cases, this happens because of a blood clot or blocked artery. Strokes can also happen if the blood vessel itself is damaged. Without a good blood supply, the brain cells don't get the oxygen they need to function. If the supply is interrupted for long enough, the brain cells will die. This is when you see people suffer permanent disabilities from having a stroke. The effects will depend how long the interruption is. For example, a mini stroke or transient ischemic attack or TIA happens when the blood vessel is temporarily blocked. The symptoms can go away within minutes as normal blood supply returns, and there might not be permanent damage to the brain cells. But a TIA is basically a giant warning sign that a more serious stroke could very well be on the way. So take it as a major red flag and seek medical attention, even if the symptoms go away by themselves. Because one study found that 43% of stroke patients experience mini stroke symptoms or TIA up to a week before they had a major stroke. Now, here's how to spot the early warning signs of a stroke. You want to use the B FAST acronym. B is for balance lost. Ask the person to stand or walk a few steps. If they're having difficulty doing either, they might be having a stroke. E is for eyesight loss. Ask the person to check the time or some words on a poster close by. If they suddenly can't, they're experiencing eyesight loss and possible stroke. F is for face drooping. Ask the person to smile. If one side of their face seems to droop or feels numb, they may be having a stroke. A is for arm weakness. Ask the person to raise both arms over their head. If they have trouble because of muscle weakness or one arm seems to droop, those are very strong signs of a stroke. S is for speech difficulty. Ask the person to repeat a simple sentence, like their name or the city they live in. If they're having a stroke, they might have trouble repeating or remembering the words. Their speech might also be slurred. T is time to call 911 or the equivalent number in your area. If the person you're observing has trouble completing any of those tests or is experiencing the other symptoms I'm about to give and other unusual signs, it's time to call 911. It's always best to be on the more cautious side of things, even if you're not 100% sure the person is having a stroke, because you don't get a do-over if you guess wrong. The signs of a stroke often appear suddenly, but that doesn't mean you won't have time to act. If you take note of these next signs and seek medical attention, even if they go away, then your chances of a good recovery drastically increases. Other possible signs of stroke you need to watch out for is you might experience a sudden severe headache in the head, scalp, or neck. This usually happens without any known cause and to people who have no personal history of severe headaches. When observing someone, you might notice them touching their head, rubbing their temples, and that they have light sensitivity. In some cases, the headache might be so severe that the individual could also start vomiting. Next, you might feel sudden numbness in the face or loose feeling in the hands, feet, arms, legs, or other extremities. This numbness can also feel like a tingling sensation. It's also common for a stroke to cause numbness on one side of the body while the other side remains fully functional. When observing someone experiencing numbness, you might notice them constantly touching, massaging, or shaking the numb areas. Next is confusion and difficulty understanding. You might be unable to understand your surroundings or lose the ability to think clearly. You might also have a more difficult time comprehending speech, language, or numbers. When observing someone, you might notice a puzzled look on their face. They have a hard time focusing or have difficulty making decisions. You might also notice them wrinkling their eyebrows, shaking their head no, talking less, or just looking downright lost. Next sign of a stroke is sudden loss of balance. You might experience difficulty standing, walking, or moving at all. When observing someone experiencing loss of balance and coordination, it might appear as though they've suddenly become very clumsy. They might look unstable and hold on to stationary objects to stay upright. They might even look drunk. Next is vision changes. You might start experiencing blurred vision or trouble seeing in one or both eyes. When observing someone who's experiencing vision changes, the person may squint, rub their eyes often, and might not be able to read all of a sudden. Next is trouble speaking. You might have slurred speech, use words incorrectly, or be unable to speak. When observing someone having trouble speaking, you might not be able to understand the other person's sentences, or have difficulty having a conversation with them. Next up is weakness. You might experience lack of strength in the face, arms, and legs. When observing someone experiencing this type of weakness, you might notice their face seems as though it's drooping, especially on one side, or they might want to consistently sit or lay down, or all of a sudden they have difficulty completing simple tasks. Now, why is a stroke so devastating? The most common types of disability after a stroke are impaired speech, restricted physical abilities, weakness or paralysis of limbs on one side of the body, difficulty gripping or holding things, and a slowed ability to communicate. People are rarely ever the same after experiencing a major stroke. A stroke could even be fatal if you're not able to get help quickly. And that's unfortunately what happened to my late uncles. Nobody knew how to read the early warning signs, and they didn't get to the hospital in time. It was too late. Knowing what I know now, things might have been different. So the faster you take action and get medical attention, the better the chances of a good recovery. The flip side is many of the factors that increase the risk of stroke are actually within our control. You have complete agency over this preventable disease. The biggest risk factors for having a stroke are if you're overweight. The scary part is 3/4 of American adults are either overweight or obese. You're more likely to have a stroke if you eat a diet high in refined grains, processed sugar, and industrial seed oils. The crazy part is 60% of the calories from the standard American diet come from those ultra-processed foods. You're more likely to have a stroke if you smoke or drink a lot of alcohol, if you have high blood pressure, you live a sedentary lifestyle, you're under chronic stress, or you have certain conditions like diabetes or atrial fibrillation. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. Here's how to improve the risk factors I just mentioned. Stop smoking and limit alcohol to a handful of times a year. Make 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep every night non-negotiable. Eat a nutrient-dense, whole foods diet. Meat, eggs, raw dairy, vegetables, and seasonal fruit. If you're not up to date with your nutritional science, the Framingham Heart Study found blood cholesterol is not a strong risk factor for coronary heart disease. There is no correlation between dietary cholesterol intake, like eating red meat and eggs, and blood cholesterol levels. According to Dr. Peter Attia, having good grip strength and elite cardiovascular fitness, and you can achieve that by doing resistance training a couple of times a week and going for a brisk walk a few times a day, results in a 5-fold reduction in all-cause mortality. There isn't a single drug on the market that gives you a 5x reduction in mortality. Movement and proper diet is medicine. Now, if you enjoyed this video, then you don't want to ignore this one. I'll see you there.